Welcome to A Well-Designed Business with your host, Luann Nigara. Luann has a lifetime of experience building a multi-million-dollar business with her husband and cousin, and she knows the challenges you face in your interior design business. Luann brings you real-life answers to your most pressing problems, as well as practical strategies to explode your interior design business. So, let's get to the business of interior design.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Power Talk Friday on A Well-Designed Business. I'm so happy to let you know that I have Jeff Bullas with me today. Hi Jeff, how are you?
Hi Luann, great to be here from sunny Sydney. Actually, it's not sunny. I'm telling a little fib there. It's actually grey, but it normally is sunny. So great to be talking to you from the other side of the world.
That's it. It's so crazy. I mean, it's so crazy. Literally the other side of the world. So I'm very happy to have you here because I'm a big fan of your work, and I'm a little impressed with myself, I have to say, that you're on my show. I have been following your work for years. I've been on your email list for years, and I really admire what you do. And before we get into the show, I'm going to share a little of the street cred about you to my audience, because they may or may not be familiar with you. Because, you know, what happens with me, Jeff, because of podcasting, I branch out into other topics in business, and that's how I come to know you guys that are not really in our industry design world. But anyway, Jeff is the author of Blogging the Smart Way, How to Create and Market a Killer Blog with Social Media. And I'm just going to share with you guys that he is listed in Forbes as one of the top 20 influencers of CMOs in 2017. He was ranked by Apollo Research as the top 20 influencers of digital marketing in the USA. He's number one global digital marketing influencer 2016. I mean, there's actually 10 different things here. I'm going to skip around. You were top 100 social media influencers in 2015, and Inc.com featured you as 20 digital marketing experts to follow on Twitter. Forbes ranked you as 8 on the world's top 40 social marketing talent. And so now maybe my buddies out there understand why I'm like pinching myself that you're here on the show with me. So thank you. Thank you.
It's a pleasure.
Okay, so here's the thing, Jeff. I want to explain to you that my colleagues out here, we've had many guests on the show talk about the value of blogging. And I do know two things to be true, that sometimes you need to hear something more than once in several different ways before you have that aha moment. And the other thing that I know is that despite all of the information and the conversations that we've had about blogging, there are still things that plague us. And I was recently talking to an interior designer during a one-on-one coaching session, and she said to me, you know, I just don't get the point. I write a blog, nobody reads it. What's the point? And I had some things to share and explain with her about it, but, you know, we have the top 20, top 100 guy in the room here today, so we don't need my opinion on it. Tell us a little bit about what your philosophy is and how blogging is really something that can be a force in our businesses, Jeff.
I sort of got into the blogging business. I'll give you a bit of context and why I believe it's so powerful and so important is that it was back in 2008. I was joined up to Facebook, and then I joined up to Twitter. I noticed people's obsessive behavior, and what really excited me about social media back then was it's the ability to actually reach the world from your own home office or a coffee shop. So all of us became publishers. So and I decided to start blogging about social media after reading a blog from HubSpot, and that came from an inspiration from a book called The New Rules of Marketing and PR, which talked about that you actually, if you created content, you're going to attract an audience and attract clients and build a business. And that was a book by David Meerman Scott. And so I started the blog based upon my reading of the book and what I observed about social media, because I was really impressed by the fact that social media gave everyone a voice globally. And no longer did you actually have to beg the media moguls or pay for attention. You could actually do it for free if you're willing to actually create great content around your passion. I know most of you are in the industry because you're passionate about interior design, and there might be different niches within that, of course. So I started writing about my passion. So it was a passion project, and I started creating content. But there was one other part to this equation. It's not just about creating content. It's really about building distribution for your content. So, you can create content, but if you don't tell the world about it, or don't share it on social media, or don't build an email list, or don't, rank in Google search very well, then no one's going to know you exist, because there's 1 billion websites. Someone says, well, why bother actually doing it? Because there's just that much competition. But if you're in a niche, it's actually a lot easier to do that. So I basically was a passion project. That's really what it was. And what happened was that the world showed up as I decided to create content the best I could at the time, and writing for me was something I discovered I was not bad at and got better at. So what happened is I started getting invitations from overseas to speak in places like Italy and New Zealand, and even as bizarre as Kuwait and Beirut, Lebanon. So what it has happened over the last 8 years as I've relentlessly and persistently created content and built distribution for that content, is that the world literally has shown up. So I experience every day the ability of content to attract an audience that wants to hear what I have to say, and also what my other writers have to say on the blog. So, and as said by that very ancient philosopher, Forrest Gump, life is a box of chocolates. And literally, as you open up emails in the morning, as you build distribution, is that you'll be surprised over time actually attracting an audience that loves what you've got to say, or loves your insights about, what you actually do. So that's really, for me, this passion project escaped the lab and became a full-time business. So someone says to me, well, what's the point of blogging? Well, I'll just tell that story over and over again, because it literally works. But it's not about doing one blog post and going, that's it, done, finished. It's about consistent and persistent production of quality content that allows people, that actually helps people overcome challenges and problems. So if you can write blog posts that address the pain points of your potential customers, then you're actually solving problems for them, and they'll come to you looking for solutions. Okay, and interior designers, of course, that's what you're doing. And it's not just solving problems, it's inspiration as well. And for you guys, a lot of that's going to be quite visual. So writing's one thing, but visual's going to be a big part of what you do. So, so that's a little insight into why I believe content and blogging is so important.
Okay. And I also just want to add that another thing to recall and to know in this discussion is you started blogging, you said 2008. Did you just tell me? 2008?
2008 was I leapt into social media, but 2009 is when we hit the go button on the actual site. Yeah.
Okay, so it's 7 years, almost 8, and I just want everybody to know you get over 4 million visitors to your site each year. So we're not talking about this little thing. So, okay, so there's two things in here, Jeff. The first is that there's two different markets that we're probably talking to right now. There are interior designers that are sitting in their studio or running or jogging right now listening to this, and they are with their passion and their ideal dream business would be to be very busy in their pond, okay, to live and exist and do business probably in a 50-mile radius of their studio, to be very well known, to come up on the Google search, to be everybody's go-to designer in their immediate area. That's one designer that we're typically speaking to in this podcast for this discussion. The other is a designer who wants to be the next Candace Olsen, that wants to be the next Tom Felicia, that has dreams of being for a celebrity interior designer. And so I know that the goals are different. And what I want to say is that for any designer that out there that dreams to be an industry leader, a celebrity interior designer, creating the platform, like this blog is a very viable way, because if you create a blog, so you're a celebrity blogger, right? So if you're an interior designer, you have the body of work, you've created this powerful blog, you get hundreds of or thousands of tens of thousands of visitors. Now you're a commodity that you go out to the design industry and you say, hey, Here I come with this following. Here I come with this base. So there's two different targets here. One is to just create more business for our business, and the other is to use as a stepping stone for the designer that has those dreams. Do you feel that we should take one or the other and address them? Because I think they're two different things. Do you agree?
I totally agree. And you might, and also depending on your goals, depends on what sort of tactics that you would be using for marketing your content or your blog or yourself. So
let's do this then. Let's do this. So since they are two different strategies, let's stick to the strategy of the interior designer that wants to kill it in their 50-mile radius, because I think we probably have way more listeners that's their immediate goal than there are designers that have a desire to rule domination. So let's talk about specifically the strategy for making money, making business from your, like the platform that your blog could bring.
Yeah. So number one, you need to have content that is going to solve problems and provide inspiration for your audience, your potential audience. Now, that's one thing, but then you need to get that audience within 50 kilometers, as we say in Australia, 50 miles in America. Mm-hmm. So essentially, if you want to do that, you would need to not just use Twitter organically, just blunt force trauma, send it to the world. Better way to do that would be to do two really things which will cost you a little bit of money, but it can be tested. Is number one, you could do Facebook ads that are lead generation ads that actually would target suburbs or regions. Okay, so you can get very granular on that. The same with Google search. You actually can target geographical areas, so local. So they're the two things that would give you that reach, because you really need to get granular with your geography. But you do need to have the content that you can do that. And it's not just about boosting a post. It's about, okay, I really want leads. So you're using something like a Facebook lead ad, which actually gets people to put in an email or request, or it's a call to action where you're capturing emails. Because what you've got to do with when you're paying for advertising, let's say on Facebook or on Google or Google AdWords, is that you want to make sure that you can continue the conversation. Now, email might be not as sexy as social and Snapchat and so on, but email is still the business tool of choice for communication. So, and I go to a lot of websites and have a look and said, well, how can I subscribe? Well, there's no incentive to subscribe. So essentially, to make it really compelling for someone to actually hand over their email, it's not rocket science. You just need to provide something that's really a premium piece of content. It might be an ebook or a cheat sheet or a PDF that people solves their problems, or a beautiful ebook that actually doesn't have to necessarily be that long, that actually provides inspiration they download by handing over their email. So when you drive ads with Facebook lead ads, for example, you would actually be asking for an email for someone to do a download of an ebook or a premium piece of content. So it's called gated content. And that way then you are building your list so that people get on your email list, and then you send out these great pieces of content, those blog posts that, provides inspiration for your potential customers. So if you're going to really kill it in the 50-mile radius of where you live and work, then to really amplify that and do that as quickly as possible would require doing some targeted Facebook and Google AdWords.
Okay. So it starts with the content. So you want to put on your website at least, a half a dozen or so decent blog posts, and then you are suggesting then you go out and create an image and put a link in the Facebook, lead ads, and try and get them to download a PDF that you might have. So what are we going to do? We're going to say we're going to write a full blog post on kitchen design, but then maybe there's a lead magnet. If they go to the blog, if they click through from Facebook, they get to the blog, and right there lives possibly top 10 mistakes people make when, hiring a kitchen contractor or something. And then
that's right. Exactly.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
And you might have a pop-up as well on that particular page, which you can get your tech developer or designer to actually do for you. And it's got a lot of great tools that can do that for you, from SumoMe through to lead pages and so on. And a lot of those are quite easy to use tools. Some people are more tech savvy than others. If you don't want to spend the time and learn them, hire someone to do it. Mm-hmm. But Yes. So once you write a piece of content, then you deliver or have a call to action that's relevant to that piece of content. Or you can have a generic one that sits across the entire site that pops up. That's going to be a pretty attractive lead magnet for anyone that shows up who's looking for interior design.
Okay. And I know one that a lot of designers use effectively is how to work with an interior designer, or what are the steps of working with an interior designer, because it's a lot of anxiety that surrounds consumers that have never worked with an interior designer before. It's sort of like, well, how does this work, and how expensive is this going to be, and what's the process like? So that happens to be an effective one in my experience with talking with so many designers over the years. So, yep. Okay, cool. All right. So now, the thing is, Jeff, there's one thing that we have talked a little bit on the show. I don't know if you're familiar with Ashley Folks, Mad Lemmings. I don't know if you guys cross paths at all. Okay, so he's an SEO expert, and we talk a little bit about titles and, going out to Google AdWords and searching what people are searching. But one of the things that this is something I need to hear over and over again, okay? So I know that by and by, titles that have the top 5, list titles, all of those tend to search well. But it just feels so crazy to have everything you do, the top 5 this, the top 3 that. Can you talk to us a little bit about titles and headlines and, best advice for that?
There's a bunch. So listicles have dominated over the last 5 to 10 years. And, there's a reason for that. They do work. They maybe don't work as well because everyone's doing them now. But then there's other different types of headlines you can try, like be a bit controversial. I remember I wrote a headline and wrote an article called Why You Should Forget Facebook. And I posted it on my blog, and it did very, very well. But then I decided to put that particular post on LinkedIn as well, and it went viral. So we ended up...
They were like, yeah, you probably weren't telling... Well, were you actually saying you should forget when you got into the content of it? Or
Absolutely. No, it was not. It wasn't clickbait. It was actually a headline that delivered on, and I delivered on that promise in the content. Okay. And the reason why... so the back end of the story was... It was a top LinkedIn article for a week globally on LinkedIn.
Whoa.
So we got 1,000 comments and we got about 300,000 or 400,000 views.
Oh my goodness.
So what you'll find is some content will work well in one spot and then it'll just go viral on another. So you've got to put your content in various places. So a controversial headline, it's sort of, why these types of curtain designs, are bad for your health. I don't know. So you
the most dangerous draperies that you could ever order.
Yeah, because if you walk into the room and stumble, you might find they wrap around your neck and you die a slow death in the corner. So maybe soft furnishings are very dangerous, but
maybe soft furnishings are dangerous.
or maybe don't buy too small a cushion because your children might swallow them. All that sort of stuff, right? But have a bit of fun with your content. Like seriously, we all take our stuff too seriously. But controversy is another one. Another one people love to hear is I think that in almost any industry is the trends. What are the top trends in the industry? And what you can do is you can do trends and then add a listicle headline to it, like the top 7 trends you should not ignore if you don't look like you're a fashion disaster. But have some right and negative headlines. They generally work a lot better than positive headlines. 10 things to avoid if you don't want to be uncool in interior design, whatever. So 10 interior design disasters, and then pick them up and pick out some of the worst designs you can find from all around the world and write those up, So negative headlines, brilliant. Trends are great. Listicles work. You've got to use the curiosity gap. In other words, don't give away your answer in the headline. That is a no-no. You really need to make sure that people go, I just got to read this to find out what it's all about, right?
Right.
So the curiosity gap's really important. It's got to be emotional. Don't when you write something that's controversial, like why I should forget Facebook, the reason, and I'll go to the actual reasoning behind what I delivered on that headline, was why I should forget Facebook for organic reach, because Facebook was reducing its organic reach down so that Facebook pages were not being seen by hardly anyone, like into single-digit percentages. So I backed that up with data. So you should forget Facebook for organic marketing because it's basically become pay to play. In other words, the only way to get visibility on Facebook, really, unless you're Kim Kardashian, is to actually pay for it. So that's what research showed, and I backed it up with different types of research and then talked about that. So don't just do clickbait stuff that doesn't deliver. I don't know, if you go to some of the sites and there's this headline and then you read it going, this has nothing to do with the headline. Right. That's clickbait.
Right. Okay. And I like your point in there. I mean, it's very easy to understand that if you put a post on Facebook, why you should forget Facebook, it's not nearly going to go as over as well. But when you put it on LinkedIn, everybody that lives on LinkedIn and thinks that's the cat's meow is going to be like, yeah, I want to read about that. That's cool, right?
Yeah. Well, maybe part of the truth is that people on LinkedIn hate Facebook.
That's what I'm saying. It's like it kind of hit a chord, right?
Yeah. So you're preaching to the converted. So yeah, you got to find the right space to put some content and then have some fun with it. But yeah.
Okay, awesome. So, I mean, I have to say that I think titles are one of the things that designers struggle with the most. I have a friend out there, designer Darla Powell. She is a designer and a blogger, and she does a good job with her titles. There's others, not to say that no one else is. Darla sticks out in my mind. But it is hard because we, by nature, are creative people, and we want to title it these amazing things. You know what I mean? And I can see now what you're doing is you're basically challenging us to use this creativity in a different way, to just think of it almost backwards with these negative posts and these controversy type headlines. And it kind of puts it on its head a little. Like, do you do exercises, Jeff, when you first were learning how to do this, where you think of what would be the obvious title, and then just trying to think out of the box and brainstorm how to flip it around on itself?
Think of how you can teach 10 positive things by 10 negative things, right? Mm-hmm. So in other words, the opposite of all these is true. But I was watching some of the I think it was Upworthy, one of the news sites that sort of like has tried to challenge BuzzFeed and some of the new online news channels and sites. And what they did is they actually asked all their writers to actually submit 20 headlines for every piece of content. Wow. So, I don't necessarily will do 20, but I will do quite a few, and I'll then, and as I'm writing, as I'm actually thinking about it, I'll actually maybe add more, take stuff up, and then I'll settle on one headline. And you're not going to get it always right. So it's trial and error, it's experimentation, it's testing. So and we test different headlines also on places like Twitter because it's so easy to test there. So we'll typically try different images and different headlines on Twitter, and we'll send out 3 or 4 different versions, and then we'll see which one works, and then it's the one that goes into the recurring tweeting bank.
So that's interesting. So you could write a blog post about, top 10 kitchen disasters or whatever, put it out there, put it to Facebook, put it to Instagram, put it to wherever we put our stuff. And if, nobody really clicks through, then 2 weeks later, change the title is what you're saying, and try it again and see if it gets different clicks and see what happens?
Yeah, I'd change the title on Twitter. I don't tend to change the title of the actual blog post.
I see. You change the title that you tease it with in the social media.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the other thing I've been experimenting with lately is because Twitter's increased its character limit from 140 to 280. And I'm finding that starting a story that leaves people hanging with 3 or 4 lines. In other words, I walked into the room and I saw the curtains and I was horrified, right?
Okay.
And then you can just leave people hanging right there, and then you can click through to the site, and then there's going to be a blog post which talks about how you recovered from the disaster, right? Or how you saved a client from design hell. Okay, so So I've been experimenting with that, and actually that's tending to generate more clicks than the generic list headlines on Twitter. So there's a lot of people are getting sort of immune to what social media has been doing for 10 years. We're 10 years into the social media revolution, which has introduced a whole bunch of headlines and tactics that are being used forever. So you've got to keep testing, trying new stuff. So I'm finding storytelling is actually producing very good results, both in the introduction to posts as well as using it on Twitter because of the change in the Twitter character limit.
Okay. And for further clarification, when we talk about these enticing headlines, we are talking about the teasers in our social media, in our Facebook, in our Instagram, in our Twitter. But then when you get to the actual blog post, you're saying that post can be a regular headline that we love, or actually for the Google guy to find our blog post, it still should have some of that, controversy headlines or the better headlines. It's a combination of two of those in there, right? No?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, you need to be. So you can have different headlines in your social accounts or variations. Still need to deliver on the headline. Mm-hmm. Have a bit of fun, experiment. But it's certainly content marketing, which is essentially what we're talking about. A blog is basically a place where you create your best content, then share it with the world. It's essentially content marketing. Mm-hmm. The other thing I'd like to mention too is that, and I'm sure all of you are already on these places, but obviously Instagram and Pinterest are much more visual. So mm-hmm. building distribution and followers on those two as an interior designer is incredibly essential. So, but Twitter can be a tool of discovery, of general brand awareness that drives people to your blog. And you can target it a little bit more geographically, but it's not as specific and targeted tool as Facebook can be. But
I find, and I could be wrong about this, but in my direct experience with all of the designers, the 270 designers and people that I've interviewed with the podcast, and then of course just to extrapolate that out to all the designers that I've met through the podcast and social media, I find that we're not generally on Twitter, that the bigger platforms, that designer that I mentioned in the beginning of the show that is looking to create that platform, that designer is on Twitter. But the rest of, the person who's really would just be so thrilled to make a couple $100,000 a year in their own target market, it's I don't know, and it feels a little bit overwhelming. It's like we know that Pinterest and Instagram and Facebook tend to, well, the first two are definitely visual. Facebook has that visual element to it, and Twitter just seems so watered back down to us, I think. And
yep.
Right?
I would. Don't try and be good at all platforms. Pick the ones that are most effective for your industry, and go and see what the top people are using in your industry. Mm-hmm. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. Have a look at what the top people are using, how they're using those social media channels. And that's what I did when I started, back in 2009. I looked at what some of the top bloggers in the world were doing, and I just basically looked at some of the stuff they were doing and repurposed it, and I'd put my own spin on it and did what I needed to do. So look at what the top performers are. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. And don't try and do every platform. Just do maybe three. It might be Pinterest, Instagram, and Facebook, for example.
Right. It's hard to do it well on multiple platforms. It really is. I mean, I know that Twitter is the stepchild of my social media. Honestly, we have lots of stuff that is scheduled via Hootsuite and so forth, but engagement, to make any traction in Twitter, you really have to come to the table. You really have to be there and talk and interact and all that stuff. And it's all I can do is to, share out the things of my friends and just retweet it. You know what I'm saying? Because it's you're so busy doing the other things in the ones that are more visual, right?
Yeah. And the other thing to keep in mind too is you don't need to get 100,000 fans or followers. It's a great, I think it was done in 2006-07. I think it was a guy called Kevin Kelly, and Kevin talked about 1,000 true fans.
Yes, I'm familiar with that.
And I think what people need to keep in mind is that you don't need 1,000 customers. You just need, 1,000 fans, and they basically, you might find within those 10, 15, 20 great customers, right? But if you build that sort of distribution, you don't have to have 100,000, even 10,000, but you if you're working locally, you can end up having just really, really loyal fans that love what you do, read what you write, listen to what you say on a podcast. So it's 1,000 true fans. I think it's really important to understand that. I think just about all of us on social media, on different channels, could generate 1,000 true fans and maybe get 1,000 on your email list. Once you've got that, then, yeah, if you want to go and be a celebrity designer, fantastic. But the reality is just get those 1,000 true fans initially. And that will require a little doubling down, a little bit of time and, discussions and interactions with people that read your stuff. So, but you can really grind it out, I think, if you're just prepared to focus.
I agree. So let's talk a little bit about, you have blog post, one that it's called The One Habit, two of them that I thought was interesting. This one habit transformed your life, and the other is the success habit that many smart people ignore. Could you talk to us a little bit about those posts and what your little tips are in there?
Yeah. The one habit that transformed my life was inspired by reading a book called Deep Work by Cal Newport. It's a book that actually writes about doing deep work as opposed to shallow work, and I'll tell you what the difference is. Number one is deep work is actually sitting down and actually writing and creating content of consequence. It's actually about creating a body of work that has insights into your industry. And when I read the book, and it was just it was about a year ago, I was on a flight back from Phoenix, Arizona, back to Australia, Sydney, and I realized that what he talked about actually is creating, writing and creating every day and writing decent blog posts and ebooks, is deep work. And I realized that he had just given a name to what I'd been doing since 2009, which is sitting down and writing every day or creating every day. And this is what is the power of actual creation, and I'm sure you experience it, but he gave a name to this deep work, is that as you create, you actually have to research, you have to go and find, what's happening here and what's happening there, and you pull it all together, and at the end of the day, it's a piece of art, it's a piece of beautiful art, and that's what interior design is. You're actually pulling in a whole bunch of different things to create this thing of beauty. That's your genius. But that doesn't happen out of a vacuum. It comes from actually sitting down and doing the deep work every day by doing the research. And I find for me writing, I have to do the research. And actually, if I want to really learn about something, is I sit down and write a blog post. And for me, that actually ends up being my deep work. And for 4 years, I got up at 4:30 a.m. and I had a day job at the time. And from 4:30 a.m. to 9 a.m., I actually sat down, researched, wrote, and published and shared that creation with the world. That's deep work. And it can be a rhythmic approach, which is every morning at 5 days a week. It could be more sabbatical. If you're a researcher or a professor, you might go away for 6 months and write your book. So deep work is something that over time turns you into one of the best in your industry. And that's what you really need to commit to, is actually doing that deep work. All the rest, respond to emails, doing quotes and proposals, that's shallow work. A necessary evil. But the reality is that unless you actually are doing that research, pulling all that information and facts together to create something of consequence, and you sharing that with the world, that's when the magic and alchemy happens.
That's exciting. And you know why I love it is because it relates on both levels. And you have related it for us that way. In other words, on one hand, we could take it to heart about creating blog content and not just putting out, fluff pieces, but really putting out thoughtful pieces that solve people's problems and address their pain points. But on the other hand, it really addresses what you're describing too. As an interior designer, the deep work is attending markets. It's attending, going to the design centers and making sure that you are aware of the different furniture lines and you have a deep, wide breadth of experience and knowledge about what it is that you do every day for a living, as opposed to just, ordering the same sofa for every client year after year after year. It's really bringing some, very intentional pride and purpose to what you're doing, it sounds like.
Yep.
I love it.
And when people read that sort of content from you, they understand that you're passionate, and they'll identify with you as a thought leader and as one of the top creators in your industry. So you are communicating your passion, but you're doing it in a way that's authentic and real.
I love it. Oh my goodness, I'm so inspired. Okay, tell us the other one. What's the success habit that most smart people ignore?
What a lot of us do is we go and do our college degree, we go and do get our university or diploma or whatever, and we go and we got that done. We go, okay, my learning's done. Now I'm going to go out and work, right? The reality is in this world of fast change is that you've only just started. So the one success habit a lot of people forget is they just go and show up at work and forget to keep learning. So it's the success habit is continuing. One of them is continuous learning, and that's what you've really got to do. And so you've got to feed yourself on the right stuff. And I did use a story of Elon Musk that he actually read 30 books a month.
Whoa. Right.
So, and if he wanted to learn about how to, launch space vehicles, he went and did research and I'm sure wrote about it and shared it and did. So the reality is that we've got to commit to a life of continuous learning, and don't think that once you've got your degree, that's it. And I think a lot of people in their industry don't do that. And yes, there's this sort of like annual requirements to do 10 hours or something of learning every year for different professions. That's actually enforced from the outside. What you've got to do is have the habit of continuous learning. That means that you're reading books about your topic, you're reading blog posts, you're downloading free ebooks and PDFs and cheat sheets. So committing to a life of continuous learning is absolutely essential, especially in this world of incredibly fast-paced change.
And you know what? It's just it's a good thing. It's a good thing to teach your kids. It's a good thing to do for yourself. And we had a guest. I don't know if you're familiar with Tom Corley. He wrote the book Rich Habits. You're not familiar?
I might have heard of it.
Yeah. And that was one of his things. He did this tremendous research project on what were the habits of the successful people. And then he did all this research on people that were not successful. And he crossed the research back and forth and found that, honest to goodness, if you line up 500 successful people, they have very similar habits. And one of them was this continuous learning, that you every week, every month dedicate yourself to always furthering your information in your field and even out of your field. Technology like this. Here's every single designer listening to us is listening, how to better their blog and everything. So it's a good lesson. I like it. Thank you. So
okay, welcome.
All righty. So here's the thing. Just give me a few. Like how to help your audience find you. Is that really just a matter of the headlines and the keyword search, or is there something in there that we could share in that regard, Jeff?
There's a bunch of ways to get different people to find you. So, for example, on Twitter, one of my strategies was after I've been on Twitter for a few months, I was just following anyone. I realized that if I followed the followers of my competitors, that was already a qualified list. In other words, someone that's already following a top interior designer in the niche you're working in is obviously they're usually following that person because they're interested in their content and what they're talking about. So over the years, I've actually followed other people that actually follow the followers of other people that are in my industry. And if you've got good content, people will check out your profile going, oh, Jeff's writing about, digital marketing, or he's writing about content marketing, he's writing about email, or he's writing about search engine optimization, or he's writing about, how to build marketing funnels. So as people, you need to sort of get people to discover you. And by following other people on social media, there's this law of reciprocation, so people will follow you back. So I've pursued this for 8 years on Twitter. And I've done it in other channels as well, but Twitter's been my go-to for me. So, yeah, I focused on some channels. And you can do that on things like LinkedIn as well. So I don't know how effective LinkedIn is for interior designers. I haven't done any research on it, but I would say there's a lot of interior designers on LinkedIn, or people are looking for fashion. But LinkedIn actually seems to be going through a bit of resurgence lately in terms of, because Microsoft bought LinkedIn, I think a year or two ago now. And there's been some major investment into the platform, and I think LinkedIn's a platform to follow in terms of marketing, and could work for interior designers because you can identify some of the top people in the industry. I don't know. It would be fun to experiment with that, I think.
Did you just say that Mark Zuckerberg bought LinkedIn?
No, Microsoft.
Oh, Microsoft. I was like, what? Yeah. I didn't hear that.
No.
Microsoft. Okay.
Microsoft bought LinkedIn. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, but even still, that what it is when a big player buys something like that it's what you're saying. It shows that there's going to be some drive or some push to revitalize and to get it going. They don't just buy it and, it's not a write-off.
Well, some of the big end of town, like, the Yahoos and that of this world have bought different platforms. Rupert Murdoch bought MySpace, and look what happened to MySpace. So just because a big company bought it doesn't mean they actually know what to do with it. But it appears that Microsoft's marriage with LinkedIn, as in buying and being the new owner, is paying off. I've actually been very impressed with LinkedIn over the last 6 to 12 months in terms of its direction. So, yeah.
Okay. Well, this is awesome. Thank you so much for spending your time with us today and sharing all your tips. And like I said, it's a little crazy for me to be, after getting your emails in my inbox for all these years, to be talking to you. So I appreciate what you do and what you share with all of us and all the lessons that you teach every day. And I would, jeffbullas.com, right, is how, if anybody wants to get involved and get your content on all your help and messaging and your tips on creating great blogs and great digital marketing and great content in general, right?
Yep. And thanks for the invite. It's been fun to actually share some ideas that hopefully will help some of your audience.
Thank you. Thank you for joining me again today for another episode of A Well-Designed Business. This podcast is a production of WindowWorks in Livingston, New Jersey, your trade resource for custom window treatments and awnings. Learn more about WindowWorks at www.windowworks-nj.com. All of our music is original music by Room 2 Productions. Please contact us if you want to learn more about original music for your business or your events.